You can't replace part of the brain. Like,
you treat them the same.
Source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the puppets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khateeb.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We got an interesting topic today with somebody who has a very unique background of running both private medtech startups and large publicly traded companies. The discussion is going to be really interesting. I'm excited to have our guest on. Before we do, a couple of quick readouts for some our sponsors and some really interesting opportunities for our medtech audience. So on one side, if you're a medtech CEO or founder, we know how difficult it is to raise awareness with investors. It's a very noisy world out there, and so it's difficult to get your message out. The other side of it is actually attracting early adopters. One of the most important things when it comes to growing a commercial pipeline, even raising money, is making sure that you can show that you have the right early adopter physicians who are ready to adopt your product, work with your product team, and open up the market. This is where Khateeb and Co. come into play. We've worked with a lot of medtech startups to develop that kind of a strategy using AI and social media. So not only do you find those early adopters, but more importantly and more easily, they find you. This way, we help you build a viable commercial pipeline and a sales pipeline that your future sales reps and VP will be very happy to have. So if you want to learn more about that, hit me up on LinkedIn or go to my website, khateebandco.com. And finally, if you are an investor listening to this show, as you know, we get great deal flow here at the State of MedTech. A lot of early stage companies who are coming just out of labs, maybe in their seed stage. And so we are doing our best to connect those early stage companies to investors. This is something that's free to you as the investor. So check the show notes below and click the link to submit your information on the check sizes that you like to write, the kind of investments that you like to make, and then we do our best to match those companies directly to you. You'll get an email from us with the company's deck and their episode on the State of MedTech. So with that being said, let's get into our show today. We have Todd Usen. Todd and I have known each other for quite a long time through LinkedIn. It's the first time we're finally getting the chance to meet each other virtually. So Todd, thank you for coming on. I'm going to give a quick roll through of your background so the audience understands how unique your background is. So you started off in the industry in large medtech companies. You were a VP of sales over at Boston Scientific. You spent time as the president of orthopedics for Smith & Nephew. And then from there, you also spent time, again, president at Olympus. So big, large strategics. What's unique about you, though, is that you actually made a successful transition into the startup world. You were CEO over at Active Surgical. You're director of the board over at Alessi, president and CEO over at Minerva. And most recently, you've been named chairman of the board at Rob Surgical and then chairman at Massmedics. So really amazing pedigree and very unique. So I can't wait to kind of dive in and sort of talk about our topics today. So did I do a good job introducing you? I think I covered it all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Omar. It's a pleasure to speak to you and looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So maybe, we can go back in time. Let's start with, again, topic of today is kind of discussing not only the differences between running a private medtech startup and a public strategic, but also the importance of assembling a board. But let's start with your publicly traded experience. What were some of the key learnings that you got when it comes to working within and rising up inside of a large strategic?
Sure. So I really cut my teeth with Boston Scientific. And as I've shared with many people, I was completely brainwashed there and loved every minute of it. I really learned a lot about the way business is run. This was a large company, obviously. I got there pretty much as a young starting out in my career, and the opportunity to grow and learn when there's already a system in place is a great way to really understand the way business runs, from things as, when sales and marketing and operations and R&D all seem to be working together on the same teams right away for career development and having management development opportunities and understanding what that's like to grow to and from, to get into management in all walks, to get into international. There's already a playbook in a sense that's written. And you get the opportunity to enhance that playbook by adding maybe new chapters, if you will, or new plays. But really the opportunity to follow in some footsteps of some superstars that were there before you and to take the best of it and to continue to grow and develop. So that, when you're at a big company like that, when you're a director or you're a vice president, you really are a higher level person because we know you've been developed. You started someplace, you've gone through the training and the development to get to those levels. But then you also realize that as a publicly traded company, there's only so many things you can always say. You have to be smart. I mean, thankfully, when I was at Boston Scientific, for those many years, social media wasn't as crazy as it is today, and I watch now of the things that are put out there by companies like Boston or Medtronic or J&J, very different than are put out there by startup companies, the things that you can and can't share. And so obviously times have changed, but at the end of the day, it's great learning and great processes that you really develop and can take with you to further your career.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm wondering, like for those who are listening, we have a lot of like younger professionals listening in the audience who are in these larger strategics. There's a big difference between being like a great individual contributor or even a director versus like running an entire division. What are some of those differences, and what kind of separates people who are able to rise up within the organization versus those who can't?
Well, I mean, a lot of times, depending on where you start. So if in my case, I started as I was selling. I was sitting with customers every day. My degree's in marketing, so I understand voice of customer and the importance of usability and making sure that the customer is happy at all times. But oftentimes, the best sales producers get promoted to manager. That doesn't always work. I mean, to get promoted to manager, you really need to go through some management development projects. So one of the things that I learned is while I was having success selling, I was given exposure to the next level up and presented with opportunities to join meetings, et cetera, et cetera. But then when you get I was tapped on the shoulder one day after leading a third of the country and then another third of the country in different roles within the endoscopy division of Boston, and tapped on the shoulder by our president saying, interested in moving out west. And I said, what are we talking about? Well, there's a vice president of sales job at our neurovascular space. And I said, what would you do? And just asking him the question, because I loved my team and the people at endoscopy. He said, Todd, there's 6 of these jobs in all of Boston Scientific. There's more now, but at the time there were 6 divisions. There were 6 VPs of sales. He goes, you're my guy. You're the top guy. I want you to, think about it seriously, talk to your family and go. Back then, moving was very important. Even to get to the levels I was at Boston Scientific, I relocated 3 or 4 times in that process. Times may have changed with that, but then when you get now you're running your own P&L in a sense. Yeah, things change because the important thing is you either, keep your same personality. And I'm a member of the team that, yes, I will make the final decision, but I'm still a member of the team. And I think what makes it successful is the difference is those that find success work within the realm of a team, set clear direction, can motivate and inspire. And those that don't just love their new title and basically like to tell people what to do and micromanage, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think there's a fine line, but I think the management development is a critical piece. To just say I was a great sales rep, I'm going to be a great manager. It's not necessarily the way it works. You really have to be developed and exposed. And we make plenty of mistakes before, so I took that first VP job, took the first SVP job, got myself ready for presidency of a big company in orthopedics. And I realized I'm still going to make mistakes. So then I got a second presidency at another job. And then you realize you take all those things that you learned, and things that you could do better, and then things that you're really good at, make sure you keep focusing on those.
Yeah. I want to kind of dig into that a little bit. You were president for U.S. Orthopedics over at Smith & Nephew, and then you're president at Olympus. And you talk about making mistakes. What were some of the more painful mistakes that you made that changed you for the better as a leader?
Yeah, I think, when I first got the opportunity, so again, Smith & Nephew did a really good job, I think, I'd like to say, of developing me. I was an SVP in sports medicine. Then I continued to grow there. And then I became a general manager in total joint. And that general manager opportunity gave me an opportunity to really understand operations, distribution, the logistics side of the business that maybe you don't focus on as well. And then to then come back and be the president over all of it, over sports medicine and then over total joints, was a great step. But I think some of those early mistakes is like, I'm just going to continue to roll. I got some great people. We're going to make sure that we're all focused. I think early is you have to really be on top of accountability of all levels of the organization. So yes, I'm the leader and the buck stops with me. But I really need to make sure that you dig yourself and understand the key things in R&D, the key things in operations, the key things in finance, in areas that maybe you weren't always as focused on all the time. And I think the learning that I received is, oftentimes you think, I'm going to go in as a leader. I'm going to take all the people that are already in place and I'm going to continue to, if they're not great, I'm going to help make them great. And because I want them to be great. And sometimes you have to realize that you just don't have the time to sit down and develop people that are in high level jobs that are already VPs if they're struggling, if they're not maybe doing the things for the prior president that you think maybe they should. And you have to be ready, willing, and able to design a team quickly that you can go to into the game with every day. And what I mean by that, I'm a big believer now, and I think I learned over time is, I think you have about 10 months, maybe 9 months, somewhere between 9 and 12, let's leave it at that when you take over a team as a leader, in about 9 months, you don't get to tell anybody, well, I inherited this person. That's why they're still on my team, or I need them because I needed the coverage there. At that 9 or 10 month mark, that's your team. And you have to be willing to say, these are the people that I would hire if I was starting my own company right now to run these parts of the organization, because you don't get to use that excuse. Well, I inherited them. That's why they're here and they've had a great career. So I'm just going to, I deal with their mistakes. I don't think a good leader gets to do that. And those are the things that you learn as you have a chance to really lead at the highest level, that you have to make sure, I want people that I inherit to succeed. I absolutely believe in my heart that that's the goal. It's not, let me just bring my own people in. But if they're not, you can't fight it and say, well, I'm going to give them a chance. You gotta make sure that the team that you have going into year 2 at minimum of a leadership team is a team you're ready to go fight with every day, and that you can sign your name to, that this would be the team I would hire. That would be probably my biggest learning when I was a young national and global leader.
Everybody, quick break. If you're a MedTech CEO or a product leader, you're going to want to listen to this. Now, I want you to imagine you're about to have a product launch. You've poured your time, your budget, your reputation into a device you're about to launch. And after all of that effort, your FDA submission, boof, gets rejected because of cybersecurity. This sounds dramatic, but it's actually not. It happens all the time to medtech companies, especially, recently with everything being digitized. This happens so often because medtech companies treat cybersecurity as a checkbox when it's now a non-negotiable design pillar. The FDA's 2023 guidance didn't suggest cybersecurity, it demanded it. So if you're not ready with threat modeling, penetration testing, SBOM management, incident response, and airtight documentation, you're not launching, period. And here's what most entrepreneurs don't realize. Scrambling to fix these issues last minute can cost over $250,000 and delay your launch by months, which, imagine the investment of getting delayed, right? The more you spend time in review limbo with the FDA is lost revenue, lost market share, and lost investor confidence. And yet, so many founders and entrepreneurs I talk to, they still treat cybersecurity as a postscript instead of a strategic advantage. Now, I've held off bringing this to my audience as a topic until now because there just wasn't a medtech-focused cybersecurity firm that I trusted, and that changed when I found Blue Goat Cyber. They specialize exclusively in medtech cybersecurity. They've helped companies like bioMaru, Inogen, Natera, along with nimble startups to get to market faster with a 100% FDA success rate. I had the chance to meet the founder, Christian Espinosa, and his story really resonated with me. So after he sold his first cybersecurity company, Alpine Security, Christian actually faced a personal health crisis. He ended up in the hospital, and that moment made him realize how vital and vulnerable medical devices really are, because a medical device saved his life. So he built Blue Goat to serve medtech CEOs and founders just like you. Whether you're pre-revenue or scaling fast, Blue Goat can offer fixed-free pricing, unlimited retests, and no surprises. This isn't bolt-on security. This is built in from day one. You wouldn't launch a device that hasn't been clinically validated, so why would you risk launching one that's vulnerable to attack? Blue Goat will secure your device, simplify your submission, accelerate your approval, and they'll do it in a way that fits your budget, your timeline, and your team. So here's what I want you to do next. Go to bluegoatcyber.com, schedule a discovery call. They do these amazing calls. They'll do an analysis with you, educate you more, because the cost of waiting could be everything that you've worked for. So
That being said, go to bluegoatcyber.com and schedule that call now. Let's get back to the episode. Now, that's a great point, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think sometimes, at least in my experience on the sales side, there's some people who get, as the saying goes, like promoted to their level of incompetence. Right? And so you can have somebody who's a great sales rep. They're extremely talented and everything. They're good at managing a smaller team, but they get promoted and promoted, and they get to a point where they're not as effective as they used to be. I'm wondering on your end, like you talk about the team, retaining A players is so important, but it's hard because if you can't pay them more money or give them a promotion, especially in a larger company where it's a little bit easier in a startup, but in a larger company, there's a lot of rules. How do you retain top talent?
Well, I think you need to be transparent. And I do think you need to challenge people to continue and give people the chance to continue to grow. So you're in a big company. There might not be the promotion day one from sales manager to director, but there can be the promotion from sales manager to sales manager 2, or I can make this sales manager lead projects with marketing, or give that person the chance to lead new launches, or sit in on key discussions about personnel decisions and organizational structure or new product development. I think any good leader, it's our job to not just communicate your performance with people at the end of a year. It's to have those conversations on a day-to-day basis. And when you're working with your team, I need to know what makes you tick. And then I have to challenge you and give you opportunities to succeed. And then at the end of the day, I need to tell you you're doing a great job, give you a high five and fist bump or chest bump or whatever it is, and make sure that you're doing a great job. But then I really do believe that inspiring others has always been when people ask what's the competency you think is most important of a leader. And I think that is the most important, because I don't need to jump on a table and say, follow me and pound my chest. But I need you to know, Omar, that I have your back, so that we sit down and have these conversations. If I tell you I'm going to do something with you or for you, I'm going to. But then this way, when I hold you accountable to things that are happening well or things that are happening not so well, you also trust that I have your back. And then you're going to be willing to run through a wall for me. I think oftentimes I think some of the earliest things I've learned from managers are things that I would never do. So you have to be able to take those things away. And some of that is the day I become your manager, you don't have to earn my trust. I have to earn your trust, because I need you to run through a wall for me. And you're not running through a wall for someone that you don't trust and believe in. The day I take over the team, you already got my trust. You can earn the opportunity maybe not to have it anymore, but I have to believe in my entire team day one. And I'm not that believer. Well, let me watch what they do. And if they earn that trust, especially at a senior level, if you're already a VP, I got to assume you have skills. If for some reason we find that there's things we need to work on, we'll do that. But I have to, it's not necessarily that message. People say it's servant leadership, but more along those lines than the micromanagement and believing in your title. So, I think those communication and the opportunity to give you more. What do you want to do? What's most important to you? If you don't get it, Omar, that you interviewed for and someone else gets it, or if I've come in and I've been faced with that maybe 2 or 3 times, I've come in and taken a new role that maybe someone that I'm inheriting on the team wanted, whether it was a VP, whether it was the president at the time, and now I'm their boss and they interviewed for the job. I don't shy away from that. And I make sure to say, listen, yes, I got this role. My job and your job together is we're going to get you ready to make sure that the next opportunity that you get for this role, you're not only going to get the interview, you're going to get the job. So let's work together towards that. And let's have goals together that we're setting to make someone really want to continue to work. So if you keep people motivated, it's not only money or retention. Of course, those are great, but I have to continue to challenge you with different job opportunities within your existing job would be the summary.
It's a great point, and something, and this is kind of a good transition into, the second part of this topic, which is on the startup side. But just this is a scenario that I feel leaders face in both startups and publicly traded company environments, which is you have, let's say, a really talented person on your team, right? They are hitting milestones, they're doing well and everything. For whatever reason, because of budgetary limitations, internal politics, whatever it might be, you cannot promote them. They're pushing in there like, hey, I want a promotion, I want this, that, and you can't give them. What do you do instead that's going to help, retain that person there, get the most out of them, and more importantly, make that person feel valued and empowered? Because a lot of times, like as much as you want to give that promotion and give a title change, all these things, a chain of events happens after, and you can't, it's preventing you from doing that. So what do you do in a situation like that where top players might be at risk for leaving?
Sure. I think it depends on the level they're at to determine if you can give a promotion or not. So when you're a president or a CEO, I can give a promotion. Now, if we're talking about getting a vice president to a senior vice president that has to go through board approval, I agree with you. That's not always that easy, but someone says, I'm ready for this next level. But at the end of the day, I'm sorry.
Like rep, I was going to say like junior to mid junior level. So like rep to manager level. Like at least in my audience, that's the group that reaches out to me the most often saying, I'm not getting the promotion I want. I'm not getting the money that I want. I should leave. And I usually have like a list of things I go through with them to be like, okay, like if you get these things satisfied, maybe you should stay. But I'm wondering how you look at that.
Yeah, that's where, like I said, what do you learn sometimes at a big company? I thought they did it wonderfully, and I've never gone anywhere else without using it, is management development. And actually there's formal programs. If you're a great rep, the opportunity to be a sales trainer. But just because you're a sales trainer doesn't mean you're a great manager. So all of a sudden, now that I put you in a management development type of a program, I'm going to call you up for 3 days to go run a training session. 4 weeks from now, you're going to come to the management meeting that I'm holding with my sales managers, just so you can hear the discussions that go on. A month from then, I'm going to bring you into the home office. You're going to spend 2 days with finance. 2 months from there, you're going to go spend 2 days in the plant watching them manufacture some technology or what have you. And Omar, by the way, all this is while you still have to hit your numbers. So now you're going to be asked to do multiple things, multitask. I'm going to give you opportunities to voice your opinions, be part of product launches, be part of teams that are going to go out there and talk to physicians, do voice of customer for me as a leader that you can do in the field and come on. If I continue to challenge and give you new work assignments and then we accomplish it, then let's talk about becoming a manager, because then you're demonstrating true management, a desire, not just some people want it for the title. Other people want it because they're good. They need to be challenged. They're ready for the next step. And I think you find that out, but always supporting people and saying, we are going to get you ready for this, but are you ready for the challenge now? Now be careful what you ask for. Let's go after this. And I was brought up that way and I was given those opportunities. And I think it was really good. And then you find out who really wants to do those multiple things that you're asked of.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great point. The next kind of phase of your career, which is an interesting one, is like, when you left these like massive, strategic companies, you jumped right into the startup world. So you were the CEO over at Active Surgical. And for those who are unaware of Active, so they are essentially a pioneer in digital surgery, and they focused on collaborative surgery. So they use surgical intelligence technology that helps empower the scopes and robots that we see, right? In a more collaborative environment. So not only a startup, but like a very different and unique startup. You're not jumping from, let's say, Olympus to like, endoscopic, company. Like this is a very, very different realm. What was that like for you? Because that transition, you can't take the playbooks that made you successful at, a place like an Olympus and Smith and Nephew and just bolted on in a startup. It just doesn't work that way. So what was that transition like, and what were some of the lessons that you learned?
Sure. I think it's interesting that the way you bring that up, that you can't take the playbooks. I don't disagree with that, but I know what the end game is supposed to look like, in my opinion, at least. So I was brought up to know what success looks like at Boston, at Smith and Nephew and Olympus, what a big organization looks like, what building products, what product launches look like, what marketing, what quality, what operations. So, to be honest with you, yes, the playbook's not in play right away, and you have to pace yourself on how to build that out. But I think the thing that just appealed to me was it was a surgeon-founded company. So oftentimes a surgeon, in this case, Dr. Peter Kim, had completed the world's first fully autonomous robotic surgery of soft tissue pretty impressively. And then you look at this technology and says, okay, I'm not sure we're ready to go raise $1 billion to build a robot. But the science behind the AI and the advanced visualization is something that, I can play with, and we can make some work. So I always believed in the technology. To me, the technology is first. Does this seem to be a solution that's solving a problem, or is a solution looking for a problem? And I've said that before. This, in my opinion, was a solution that solves a problem. It allowed physicians to visualize things that she could not see without the help of something like active surgical. Without any help of dyes or any other mechanical means, this is something that allows physicians and to provide the data and the information. What did I learn, though, is a couple interesting things. First, like I said, if you're a director at Boston Scientific or a vice president at Boston Scientific or Smith & Nephew, and you're a vice president at a startup company, that doesn't mean you're less talented, but it doesn't mean you've gone through the same training. It doesn't mean that you've had the chance because you may have always been in startups. It means you're the best at what you do. You have the most experience at that particular company, but it doesn't mean that, it's not right for me to think that someone's a VP. They've gone through they understand all operations and all logistics and all the key things they need to run if they're the VP of R&D, or they've taken products through the FDA, or they've been on tiger teams, as we used to call it, or they work with marketing and sales and finance, and they actually have run a P&L. You can't be a VP at some of the big companies without having pretty good exposure to a P&L, and finance is your partner, and quality and compliance are your partners, but that's not necessarily the case at a startup. So with respect, you have to understand that and make sure that now it's up to me to take advantage of the skills that these people have, but also to bring some other information to make sure that I'm getting them as well-rounded as they can on the other things that we need as a company. So I realize the CEO is doing a lot more work at a startup on the basics than a vice president might be at Boston Scientific, because you have teams of people doing all your marketing and giving you the information on operations and compliance and what have you. But as the CEO, you have to go do that in partnership. So I don't think that's a secret to anybody, but I do think it's something people have to respect. I'm not saying the people are any less talented. They're as talented, if not more talented, with their entrepreneurial spirit, but they don't have the same background. So I can't expect to start talking to someone about quality assurance and the tests that have to be done and all the clinical work, or understanding the value analysis committee at a hospital just because you're a vice president at a startup. You might be, like I said, the vice president because you're either a founder or you're just a brilliant engineer has come up with amazing things, but truly has never been in the operating room at a hospital before. And I found that to be more the norm than the exception, that most of the people developing these unbelievable technologies have never set foot in the operating room to actually watch the procedures that they're building products to make better. And I think that's critical. So that's one of the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure everyone at a startup company went and spent the day with a couple of the reps, or spent the day with a couple of the engineers or leadership team, I should say, in the operating room in hospitals, watching how these procedures go off so they can then truly understand what their design is doing. So, those would be a couple of main differences that I noticed, but not to just keep jumping. At the end of the day, I had never had to raise money. I had never been told, okay, for us to survive in 6 months, and this was the case, in 6 months, we're out of cash. Okay. So let me just make sure I understand what I have to sell the value proposition, the solution to the problem that exists. I have to sell the team, and then I have to sell myself. Got it. It's sales. It's, now anything else and, liquidation preferences and all this other stuff. Yeah, I have legal people that help me with that. And at the beginning, and then you learn it all yourself as you go through. But at the end of the day, can I sell the value proposition? Can I sell the team that we have? And can I sell myself as a leader? And if I can do that, that's raising money. And that's what we did. And so that to me was, if I can't sell those three things, I shouldn't be at the company. And I've always tried to keep things simple anyway. So that's as simple as I kept it. And thankfully it worked. Times were different. I know the capital markets are not what they are today, but we had tremendous success, and we had a tremendous team that was very easy to sell the benefits of the team.
No, that makes sense. I'm wondering, because I see this often, which is somebody who spent 10, 20 plus years at a J&J, a Medtronic, a Boston Sci, etc., and they transition over to the startup world. What are, at least from your perspective on some of your peers and colleagues, what do you feel like is one of the most common mistakes that happens in that transition, whether somebody's moving over as a CEO or even over as a VP?
I think a couple things happen. So first, if people are moving over and love their title, they're going to get in trouble. So, okay, I'm the CEO and I just came from Boston Scientific or J&J or Medtronic, and I know that CEO job. So, I have all these people around me. You got to be willing to, the mistake is you're going to be doing a lot of this work. You have to study, you have to really understand investment. You have to really understand VC, private equity, etc. And then you really have to be willing to go out into the street and talk to the customer, whether it's a surgeon, whether it's a specialist, whether it's a tech, and really understand that. And then I think the critical thing is understanding what's most important. You're in a startup company and you're in a medical device. Quality is still most important. And if you don't have someone that either understands quality or someone that understands, you bring in operations and understanding contract manufacturers and the quality, that's the first position that I hired for before hiring for commercial or before hiring for some other multiple finance people. You got to make sure that you're doing it right. You get the regulatory pathway correct. You got to do everything, the right way in that sense. And I think that's really important as you're building out a team. So as you're coming in and leading, I think some of the early mistakes is also CEOs realize, okay, the board might tell them or the investors might tell them, we have this much money. So they feel, okay, I'm going to have to do all these jobs. So now I've walked into companies and I sit on with groups of people that I'm now a board member with, with some companies. And I also have peers that are CEOs that might be CEO engineers. And we're that never had to do all that raising money, but they're brilliant minds of creating technology, and said, okay, I'm going to have to do the finances. I'm going to do the payroll. I'm going to do some sales because sales is easy. I've been to Best Buy and I've been to, an auto dealership. How hard could it be? But it's a different skill set, obviously, in medical sales. I would say the biggest mistake that young CEOs or leaders make is not getting a few key people around you that I would call force multipliers. You have to, no matter how much I've grown to understand R&D or how much I've grown to understand operations and manufacturing, I can't lead those. I can hold you accountable. I needed to go get the experts there because the better the people that I hire, the better we're going to be. And that's money, in my opinion, that's well spent. If I think I'm saving money by not hiring a leader in a certain function, I just think that's short-sighted by both the leadership and the board. And because great technology wins sometimes. Great technology with great people seems to win a lot more. Great people with average technology, I actually think wins more often than just great technology with lousy people. And when I say lousy, not enough people. You need some experts in the table. I can't be the expert. I know that I'm not an expert at a lot. I have to look at people that are experts in their silo and trust their beliefs and ask them, tell me what we need to be successful. And I think that's one of the things that I find other leaders sometimes don't do, A, to save money, and B, to save their egos. But my ego's better because I know that someone like you, Omar, has your skills that I don't have. And I'm going to go to you and say, talk to me. What do we need to be great? I'm going to hold you accountable to what you tell me. And I'm still going to challenge it. But I'm okay not making the final, it's not my opinion of what we need in all areas. And I think that's part of the problems of early leaders in some startups.
Wonderful. I love that. And it kind of a good segue into this one topic, which is a very unique one and not a lot of people can talk about it, which is the art and science, if you want to call it that, of assembling a board. And I think that the mistake that I see people make is even if you're in a startup and you're at a VP and you interface with the board and now you become a CEO, it's like, oh yeah, I've dealt with the board before. When you're the CEO dealing with the board, it's a very different scenario than when you're just a VP. And then assembling a board, I think there's a lot of strategy that goes behind it because it's not just enough to say, let's get people who have really big names and a lot of money, right? Because that's sometimes not the right approach. So how do you think about that? Because it's kind of like assembling like an all-star sports team, Yeah. So like you can't, even in sports, like if you look in basketball, getting all-stars in all positions for your NBA team is actually not a good idea, right? So how do you think about assembling a board and where's the best place to start?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, oftentimes when you're brought in, you might have an early investor that puts some seed money down. If you're a founder, obviously, the founder and their first investor are probably going to be on the board. That's early starting. So there's going to be venture capital or private equity, whoever is putting some money in, and they have a right when you're leading around to be a board member. I think, I learned over time that you have to really interview the investors as much as they're interviewing you and find out what needs, because if you're really good, you're going to get money. I still absolutely believe this. If your story is good, if your product's good, if you're solving a problem, and you have a good team, you're going to get some money. But at the end of the day, when you're talking to investors, knowing that they're going to lead around and be on the board, you really have to make sure that what are they bringing? Sometimes you work with people that are not the leaders of a VC, that are doing all this work, and you fall in love with them, and you think that they're going to be the board member, and then they put money in, and the board member is someone that was never part of any of the discussions and doesn't necessarily know your company. And that's okay. They've given money, but then you have to understand that going in. What I would say as a CEO, the single most important board member is an independent person that's operated. Now, that's been an operator that's done things that you're doing and going through. So as I've been brought on as an independent board member, chairman of one, an independent board member of the other, my number one goal is to make sure that I am a great sounding board and strategist with the CEO, that I'm hopefully bringing my experiences and can relate to the things that, in this case, they're going through, he's going through in this case. But I think it's really important, because if you don't have anyone on the board that's raised money, that's operated a company, that's built HR, that's built the functions, that's done the things, then you're kind of alone. Because it's been said to me the first time I became a CEO is a very lonely job. You don't have anyone to vent to. You're not going to vent to your investors, because, you want to make sure that they realize that, we're working together. Yes, you share open, honest issues that you're facing, but you need to have that person that you can strategize with on the board. So I think what I learned the first time I was putting a board together, and then what I've taken from that while I'm a board member, is my sole goal is to make sure that I am there as a true sounding board to the CEO, helping and strategizing on the things when they ask me. I don't overstep. But then also to share with the investors on the board that, hey, this is really the right strategy. I know you guys may not think so, because you definitely have a responsibility to babysit your money. But at the end of the day, we still have a responsibility to run this company. And, these are some of the strategies that, we've talked about, we've challenged, and, you have to throw your support there. Doesn't mean you need to be best friends with the CEO. And I can, behind the scenes, hold the CEO accountable, and they can challenge me as well. And that's great. But at the end of the day, they definitely need someone that they can strategize with. And if you don't have that person that's done that, I think it makes it really unfair and difficult for a CEO. But it's up to the CEO to do it. So it's their own fault if they haven't done it. So I'm not, I think that's really important. And then if you're just bringing on investors as your whole board is investors, you also then have to understand, and you probably need some advisors outside. In my case, I counted on some of my board observers as people that I'd strategize with regularly, because I needed them. They were great, because sometimes, your board is made up of investors, and while they're brilliant and they're unbelievable and they believe in you and they were never bad, but their goals are, no matter what anyone says, their goals are still a little different than mine. Yes, they want the company to be successful and get a return on their investment, but there's a time frame. Things are different. They have 5 other, 10 other, 15 other companies that they're also care just as much about, where as a CEO, I'm 24/7 focused on this company, and I got to do what's right. And I want to just make sure that I have a few board members that truly understand that. So that's what I try to be as a board member, if that makes sense.
All right, everyone, quick commercial break. If you're a MedTech CEO/founder, or maybe you're a sales or marketing leader at a startup or a scale up, you're going to want to listen to this. Are you struggling to get in front of your ideal audience, whether that's investors or perhaps clinicians who want to adopt your product? Maybe you're getting ghosted. You send emails and messages and nothing comes back, nothing happens, right? Or worse, nobody knows who you are, right? In business, visibility is everything. And I always tell people, if you want to persuade before persuasion can happen, you have to learn how to get attention. So if your sales team is desperate for traction, clinicians don't know your name, investors have never heard of you, you're losing opportunities every day. And that needs to change now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. That's where my company, Khateeb & Co. comes in. We don't just do marketing, we do growth. we figure out how to engineer markets by creating magnetic messaging that makes you impossible to ignore. And we build high impact strategies, of course, using social media, but other channels such as email, text, and others to help turn content and messaging into commercial pipeline, and it leads into closed deals. As an example, we worked with a surgical robotics company in raising a $31 million Series A, and then they needed help on their pre-market release. So we packed their CRM with 198 surgeon leads and nurtured them down. That ended up becoming 4 closed hospitals. 4 hospitals closed and adopted this technology within a period of 6 months, and they got 2 great key opinion leaders in the process. So whether you're a startup founder wearing too many hats, or maybe you have a marketing team that just spread too thin and they don't have the expertise, my team and I plug in and partner up with your company, and we amplify your reach. From crafting powerful sales scripts to optimizing your team's demo calls, creating content, having it go out on a consistent basis, we transform your outreach into a growth engine. So if you're ready to dominate your market, you're ready to become a known name and people to know of you and take your calls and take your meetings, I want you to act right now. Don't wait anymore, because you've already wasted it plenty of time. Go to growmymedtech.com. That's growmymedtech.com. And I want you to schedule a quick call. My team and I will give you a free analysis with 2 to 3 actionable ideas. There's no strings attached. And if we're a fit, great. We can get partnered up and we can help you go to the next level. And if not, look, the ideas are always free. So do not wait and don't waste any more time. Go to growmymedtech.com right now, and let's make you the go-to name in your niche. Now, let's get back to the episode. That makes a lot of sense. Something that, again, sometimes you don't have control of this as a CEO, but I always have mixed feelings sometimes when I see that, let's say, a strategic invest early on into a company and then they hold a board seat, right? Mm-hmm. And so that can introduce different biases, right? How do you feel about that overall? And, like, I don't know, that, like, I don't know whether that's a good thing, a bad thing. What's your take on that? And how should a CEO think about that?
Well, it's actually interesting. So when I was at Olympus as a president of medical, I sat on the board of companies that we were investing in, and then eventually purchased, after, but we were investing in them, and I actually had a board seat. And I learned then that, yeah, we can really sway a lot because we're putting a lot of money in. But again, if you're truly looking at the business and you're truly looking at the business opportunity and you believe in the CEO, I think it can work. I do think there's a time, depending on the state, so when I was at Active Surgical, we had opportunities to bring a couple of different strategics in really early that wanted to. And we as a board decided because maybe we didn't need it at the time. You always need money, but we had a really great opportunity to raise the money that we needed at the time without strategics. So it gave us a little more time to set our own path instead of being the path of someone else. Now, there's a lot of people that believe that if you have a strategic that's investor or on the board, it's going to scare strategics away from the company for acquisition if M&A ever happens later down the line. I don't see that as much because you look at the companies, whether it's J&J or Medtronic, and they put investments in a lot of companies, and they probably have a 30% rate of turning it into acquisition. It might be a little higher now, but not 100%. So if the product's good and someone else wants it, they're going to, that's our job as a CEO. So, but to directly answer your question, it depends who on the board. If you're getting, again, someone that's just from head of marketing at a company that was just placed on the board to babysit it, and they're not really telling you that much, but they're just keeping an eye, then you need to know that and say, okay, great. Then I'm not going to, there's going to be certain strategic conversations that I'm having with other board members behind the scenes, probably, nothing that needs a vote, anything formal you have to do with a formal board, but, I'm not going to necessarily seek counsel. Now, I wasn't in that situation as a CEO, but, I know the situation as that strategic that sat on a board. I have to make myself valuable to that CEO, or as every other board member does, or it doesn't pay off, or they'll just ignore me. And that's what I would do. I would, they're going to have their seat on the board and know that they're just there to babysit and see what's happening. I'm going to keep them posted. But hopefully, if they're true, there's a lot of tremendous strategics out there in our industry. Look, I mean, you know the companies. they know how to do this. They put someone on the board. They really are interested in making sure this company succeeds. And me as a CEO, I'm not taking their money or putting them on the board unless I see the outcome being like they would be a potentially amazing partner. You know what I mean? They have to, and then it's a win-win if you do it right.
That makes sense. I'm wondering, something I've noticed recently is there seems to be kind of like a no man's land of funding for medtech companies these days. Raising initial seed capital through friends and family or grants is not an issue, but there's a moment where it's usually when a company is right after FDA approval, but they're pre-commercial, where almost nobody wants to touch them. Venture capitalists who I speak to these days struggling to raise money from LPs because LPs are not just sending money to, VCs anymore just to fund a PowerPoint company. They want to see that they're funding companies that are in growth stage or commercial and stuff. And so now it's like become really difficult for these companies to raise money. What's your advice to those CEOs? Do you feel that this is a moment where strategics have to start stepping in to, help funding these early stage companies? I'm just wondering what MedTech does in this sort of this bubble or this void of funding.
Yeah, and it's definitely changed over the last 3 years. The capital markets are changed completely. And where VC used to be willing to invest significantly earlier in A rounds, well before commercial, it was more the space. Oh, we love robotics. Everyone wanted to invest in the robot. You say, why? I say, because it's a robot, and it wasn't really because it's, any other reason other than everyone was doing it. Let's do it. To be fair, after COVID, I think a lot of the VCs, they had to protect their portfolio companies. So they had to leave a lot of their dry powder to the side for their portfolio companies versus just going out and placing the same bets. And PE actually started coming in earlier than, PE firms were coming in more in not necessarily in seed, but more in the A and B rounds, and filling the role that oftentimes VC, and it's dangerous because I think PE has done a really good job of doing that. And it's dangerous a little to some of the VC firms that, aren't able to do that because that's what venture capital is. I remember speaking and now as a board member and hearing, at conferences, well, we can't invest in you. This is a VC. We can't invest in you till you're either regulatory cleared or commercial. I say, well, I don't need you then. I need you now. So it's a different world. I mean, that's not why I don't need a venture capital that tells me they do A rounds if they're not willing to do pre-regulatory or pre-commercial. Now, with strategics, Omar, what I've noticed now as well, and being a big strategic that had the luxury of acquiring some technology, I didn't always see big strategics always willing to place bets on startups that were 5-6 years away, unless it was just, we found the cure to cancer. Oftentimes, they're still waiting for the regulatory clearance pathway or product market fit to have been proven because they don't want to be the investment house that's has to go through FDA or MDR for CE mark right now. That's a lot different than it used to be. Even the big big strategic houses are waiting to see you have that at minimum regulatory clearance. They can, it's okay. They can take it over with some scale and with some money at that point. But I don't see a lot of investors, and I'm not saying they're wrong, by the way, it's just the way the market is, willing to place the bets as much as they were in the past, pre-clearance and pre-commercial, unless they really, really have a strong understanding of the technology. They have some really brilliant entrepreneurs and residents in-house who can really vouch and discuss the technology and why it makes a difference. Those that don't use those entrepreneurs and residents, usually you worry a little about because they just can't, well, I ran this company and I've done all these successful investments. The market's changed too much. You need some expertise to do your diligence of, like I said, people that have operated and people that are currently operating that can really share experiences. So I do think family offices are still a brilliant way to raise money. I think family offices have the luxury of taking a little more chance. I don't mean that they can go spend the family's money, but the people that usually run the family office investing are really smart, talented people that aren't going to take crazy risks, but they're going to take a bigger risk because their LP, their money is already there. The family money is already there. They're not looking to go appease their LPs. Now, let me throw one last flip side to that. If I was giving a counter to, well, it's harder to get money right now. Venture capital firms, you're hearing announcements. They just raised a new fund. They just got more money. They just did all these new things. The good ones are still investing because LPs are not giving their money to venture capital firms with the goal of the venture capital firms just plugging that money just into the portfolio companies. They're looking for the next great thing. They're looking for the next big investment. So I actually still believe there's plenty of money out there from venture capital because those places that have raised funds that have strong LPs that want them to invest, they don't give them the money to sit on it. They give them the money to invest it. I just think just like companies get weeded out of who's strong and who's not, it's clear which VCs are really strong and who's not, and who's still willing to take the chances on placing bets on companies. And that's the job of a CEO to really, and their board and their existing investors and relationships to find out who's really in the game or who's just making the calls to you just because that's their job to tell you we want to invest and we want to learn more about you, but they have no intention of investing. They're just trying to keep their doors open.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, we saw this in the SaaS industry in 2021 where just an ungodly amount of money went into SaaS. Now there's a big pullback on that. And I think what has probably changed that, I think we've exited the time or bubble of like just easy money, ZERP era of like zero interest rates and everything. And so now I think you can't just have like a really good technology and some patents and stuff. I think, founders, whether you're there in the SaaS world or like in medtech or anything, you're expected to really build a viable business that can go it alone. And if we look at the last couple of months, I mean, we had Silk Road being acquired for like less than they were valued at their peak, right? So those things aren't good. These things happen for a variety of reasons. I think Merit Medical as well is another one. They acquired, I think Endogastric Solutions. But point being is that like, I think that it's, go ahead, Todd.
No, I was going to say, yeah. And it's hard as a CEO because that deal that you just mentioned, the Merit, they got EGS at a number that EGS had a bigger number offered to them a handful of years ago, but it wasn't enough a handful of years ago. As a CEO, the times are different, and sometimes you take the opportunity. It's a successful exit for patients and the employees, hopefully. But you're right, the market is not bearing out what it might have before. But please continue. I just when you brought that up, it's been a major discussion point with a lot of people of you can get big bargains right now. I guess Carl Storz is doing it with the census. And those are public. I'm not saying they're great companies they're buying. So I'm not, but they're definitely at a discount to where they were in their heyday.
Yeah. And at least from where I sit, and I have a bias towards this because I'm a commercial guy and I'm very big on pipeline, is that I feel like a lot of these early stage companies, they don't act with enough urgency to say, hey, we need to figure out how do we position and solve this problem to the market in a very public way and attract pipeline. Because I think that gives you more leverage when you can go to a strategic and say, hey, look, like, and again, you've done this more than I have. So you tell me if I'm wrong about this, but when you're able to say, hey, look, here are our patents, here is our technology that's great, here's existing customers. And by the way, like, here's this pipeline of interested hospitals, physicians, et cetera. And we have a system of how we can move them into a close. Like, I feel like when you're selling your company, you're also selling like a system for business that, just needs to be a bolt-on.
You're asking, in the past, it was always stressing that you have commercial access, you have an opportunity of customer base. We're going to add to your existing portfolio of product and make you richer. Are you asking, is that still the case? Or are you asking, is that the way to sell companies today?
I'm asking like how, that the importance of is that today, it's not enough just to have like, oh, we have a small customer base and we have really good technology. Like, you actually have to show like, viable commercial pipeline and a sales and commercial system that a company can buy and say, hey, like, this is a fully functioning business. The whole point is that like, there's no shortcut to getting acquired now. You should just focus on building a great company that can go it alone. And if you do that, you'll get acquired.
Well, I think that's the line of we should build a company to be bought, not to be sold. If you're building to sell, you actually focus on different things. You may just spend money where you wouldn't necessarily spend money. Your margins aren't where they could be. Your profitability is not where it can be. But you're basically going to let whoever buys it will take care of all that other stuff. They'll clean it up. We've just proven that we can sell the product. I think the two big things from a big strategic is, yes, there's revenue there, and it's a market they believe in, but oftentimes it's also an enabling technology to their existing technology. So if it's an enabling technology, meaning they have something that this product will enhance the bag, it gives their reps a reason to talk to physicians even more and beef it up, or it's actually something that will by using this product will help them sell another product that's already in their pipeline and actually do better. So I absolutely agree. It's very difficult as a device to just sell on what we could be in the future. I mean, you gotta have proven product market fit but that's to the advantage of, I think, a company as well. And oftentimes I can't tell you how many times in sitting in CEO groups that people present their decks. Hey, I'm going to go present to investors. And in their decks and then will be a great exit opportunity or acquired by the following companies. And I'm like, no, I don't think you want to put that stuff in a deck, because if you tell investors or strategics that your goal is to sell, you've lost all your leverage, all of it. There's no leverage left, because now it's like, okay, right, they're building this thing to sell. Let's just wait till they start running out of cash. And then we believe in it. We can pick up the assets, or we're going to make a lowball offer and they're going to be forced to accept it. But if you're demonstrating that you can build a company, that we can be a freestanding company, we can go IPO when they ever come back and, as they get stronger, or we can be a well-funded, privately funded organization and do this by ourselves. Then you're building yourself to be bought versus building yourself to sell. And there's a huge difference on CEOs and businesses that demonstrate this. And there's been some amazing companies that then have bidding wars on how many people want them, because they've done such an outstanding job on by themselves, and their technology is super. And I think M&A has really kicked in again. I mean, you've seen the big boys, you've seen the Boston Scientifics and Strikers making more moves, and Edwards is signing deals. And then some of the big companies are still shying away a little. Maybe they've been burnt in the past because they did buy companies too early, before they had proven product market fit. And so there's no right answer, but it's the more you can prove that your product works and it enables their existing bag, which is part of the CEO of the startup's job, is to understand every product in the bag of a strategic that's looking at you, and how they sell it, who they sell it to, and how your product will make a difference, because that needs to be part of your pitch to them, if you will. That's just as important as them knowing your product, like a big strategic coming in. You have to do as much research on them as they do on you, and even more.
No, absolutely. And I'm hoping, just since last year, we see that the M&A activity is picking up, and hopefully the IPO activities pick up as well. I mean, just for the audience, in terms of like numbers, MedTech IPO activity kind of last peaked back in 2021. So that was when we had 47 companies going public on US exchanges for about $13 billion. Then that was followed on by just $100 million. So we went from $13 billion and 47 companies to $100 million and 4 IPOs in early 2022. And then nothing for like 5 quarters. And then this year we saw, a little bit of a return of some of the MedTech IPOs. I'm hoping to see more of those, because, it just, it brings in more money into the ecosystem, and it helps accelerate these companies. But I'm hoping we see more IPO activity. We'll see the rest of this year. The Fed hasn't given us a rate cut that they promised, and we're in election year, so it's going to be interesting. And maybe just to kind of like round things out, what are your thoughts on what the MedTech investing ecosystem is going to look like for the rest of the year, given we have a pretty interesting election ahead of us, and again, the Fed hasn't done a rate cut. So what are your sort of final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, and one of the things that I focus on with MassMedic, and as its chairman, working with the team and Brian Johnson, who's a great leader, is really trying to understand what's happening in Washington, both from, every congressperson means something, and who, not just the president. It trickles down, because there's so many committees and so much that's happening with belief in technology. But my own belief, and just talking to different financial people and some bankers, it sounds, the thought is it's picking up investment towards the end of the year. The election will be a big, let the election happen, and we're going to start seeing Q1 and Q2 start getting back to where it was pre-COVID on that trend. And the opportunity for investment is going to continue, because I still believe there may be fewer companies that get money, but if you're a good company and there's good technology, I absolutely think you're going to get money that you need, and significant money. And then, like you said, we'll see when IPOs, that's a different world when the IPOs start, because that's banking and finance more than medtech specifically, when the rates. But I absolutely believe that, and the trends, and sitting with AdvaMed and being at key meetings there as well, that the trends are picking up. Fourth quarter should be a good restart. And it's actually already restarted, as you're seeing the trends start to go up in certain industries. And I do think by Q2 of 25, I think we'll be back in a really stable position. Now, who am I? Nobody. That's an opinion based on communicating with others. But I feel very bullish on the market, on medtech, because at the end of the day, Omar, if you're going to invest in something, unfortunately, people get sick. Unfortunately, people need treatments for different disease and different surgical procedures and intervention. Fortunately, it's a recession-proof space if you have the right technology. So medtech is not the place to necessarily run away from if you're investing. And I don't see that happening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the benefits of medtech is that while you don't see these like massive 100x, 1000x returns and stuff, it's a pretty steady Eddie industry, and I think that what's good is that there's a little bit more predictability. If you have a really good technology that solves a problem, you have a viable market, like the path is somebody's going to buy you. Right. And it's not that clear in other industries. So I think that's kind of the nice thing about our industry. Todd, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Hope to have you guys have you back on the show again. But in the meantime, where can people find you online? Yeah.
So obviously, my name from LinkedIn. You can always look me up, send me a message, and that's the easiest. And still out there doing my thing and, focusing on a couple companies as chairman, company as CEO. So, I'm not the big social media outside of LinkedIn. And I follow you, Omar, on LinkedIn, and follow a lot of people. So I guess just plug my name in LinkedIn and you got me. So that's the easiest way to do it.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I want to thank the listeners for listening once again. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, give us 5 stars. And with that, I'm your host, Omar Khateeb, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.